Okay, everybody. So let's go ahead and start. I think we have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a quorum. The only person I know that's going to be late is Bill Durrance, who's had to attend a city function with the reopening of the wharf. So he said he'll be a few minutes late. Jay was here, so I assume he's coming back.
Which side? East or west?
Did we turn the air on? Is the air on? Because it's going to get hot in here.
Oh no.
So welcome to October 23rd. Beverly, can you take roll call?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Beverly.
Chairman French.
Here.
Mr. Emerson.
Here.
Mr. Ellis. Dr. O'Halloran.
Here.
Mr. Durham. Ms. Odell.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. McCackey.
Here.
Mr. Cole. Thank you.
5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Ooh, we don't do 1, 2. We don't have 1.
No, 5 is.
2, 3, 4. We got 5.
Yeah.
We got to count me. Count me.
Boom. Actually did something for myself.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. So can we have a first and a second to open discussion on the minutes?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second to open discussion on the minutes. Do we have any comments before we call for a vote to accept?
No.
Okay, then let's go ahead and vote to approve the minutes of the September 18th meeting. Beverly, can we go?
Yes, sir.
Some air. I feel something. But it freezes.
Okay, it's up. Well, Beverly, I can't, what do I do here? I'm stuck.
You're stuck.
God, I love this system.
Are you saying yes?
I'm saying yes. Oh, there we go.
Second.
Okay, so you're ready. After she finishes.
Are we all in?
Let me put in Commissioner Jones as being ready, and Mr. Dorrance.
Okay, motion carries. So the next item on the agenda are two presentations, one by the board members that went to APTA, and one on the bike share program by Adrian. So I think since Bill's running late, we're going to start with the bike share.
Sure.
Why keep you in suspense?
It's over here, Beverly.
Yes, sir.
Which button do I take first?
Let's see. Forward and back. This way.
Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm here to talk to you about whoa.
Talk about whoa.
Here we go.
Whoa.
I'm going to talk about our bike share program. The past, where we are now, and then in the future. So for those who don't know, we have two stations. One here at ITC, and the other one at Ellis Square, which is owned by the city. And we launched in 2014 with those two stations. So we're one of only 2 transit providers in the entire country that runs bike share programs. The other one being LA. And since 2014, a lot of the technology has changed. So now there's more dockless systems, and also there's more private systems in the U.S. More than one. So this is how the market is now, and there's been a lot of growth in the last 2 years. Private companies are more prevalent now than where the public sector was at when we launched, and there's rapid growth. So New Orleans anticipated this, and they released a no-cost RFP in 2016, which basically means that they had the rights. They let a company come in and sponsor for to be private instead of them operating themselves. So the city of Savannah now is preparing to do this themselves. They have put a block on any private operators coming in now, but until they can regulate it. So it looks like it's going to be a dockless system that comes to the city of Savannah eventually.
A what?
A dockless system. So what a dockless system is that there's no docks that we had. So the technology on the bikes, you check in and out on your smartphone right in front of you. So I can put in a number of the bike, and the locking mechanism will just stop. So here's some of the companies that are big right now. And here's some of the current issues that we have. So we have no dedicated bike mechanic or dedicated mobility manager, and no current funding source. And since we have only 2 stations, it's mostly a tourist item. There isn't really a way for us to use it as transit. You can't go point A to point B unless it's from here, the ITC, to Ellis Square. From all the people that I speak to on a day-to-day basis that use a bike share, I don't think a single one of them have been from the city of Savannah. Here is a graph of our revenue, and you see it's slowly going down in the last 3 years. One of the reasons for this, most of our bikes are past their useful life, and we don't have the staff to keep the bikes up to date. So where do we go from here? We have 2 options. Either keep the status quo and try to expand, or discontinue our bike share completely. This is what option 1 would look like. We need to secure dedicated bike share funding. This is kind of an issue because the FTA does not allow any bike share funding to be used with their money. So we'd have to find other funding sources. We'd also need to expand in accordance with our existing expansion study. This was done in 2015 after we launched in 2014, and it called for expansion to 10 total stations in addition of 8. I'll go over those in a second. We'd also need to hire a dedicated mobility manager and hire dedicated bike mechanics. So this is an estimate of what our capital costs would be like if we expanded. These numbers are from B-Cycle, which is our current bike share provider. It'd be about $360,000 estimated. If we expand, our estimated operating costs would be $320,000 per year. There's $84,000 administrative costs and about $240,000 estimate for maintenance. And these numbers are from Human Resource Department and also bike share feasibility expansion studies. So what would be the pros and cons of option 1? Well, we'd be able to keep and enhance our multimodal options along with our ferry and along with our fixed route system. This also be a means for us to introduce more choice riders to our system, coming off the bikes, getting onto our fixed routes, and also be good for public perception, showing that we can have this more robust bike share system. The cons of it is that we still have unsecured funding. Like I said earlier, there's no FTA money available for bike shares. We're also currently understaffed, so we'd have to fix those problems. And competition with these private multi-million-dollar companies is intimate. You have companies that are buying 100,000 bikes at once and dumping them in different cities, and that keeps their costs real down, and it's very hard for public one city systems to compete with that. And then if we don't do expansion well, our reception might not be as good as we'd like it. So option 2 is discontinuation. And this is simple. We have to cease operations and then remove the equipment that we have. So we'd sell it back to B-Cycle or to a different operator, or we'd scrap it. And here's the pros and the cons. Private sector will be able to fill the first mile and last mile role at no cost, and this will be happening in a couple of years. It also help us shed our poor public image. I get a lot of complaints about our bikes not working, our stations are down. We have a Generation 1 bike share system, and right now the Generation 4 and 5 are out there in the market. It's also free up time for our diesel mechanics. Now that we have new buses now, but still, the more time we have for mechanics to work, the better that'll be. And also be a net positive for us. We're losing money with our system right now. If we discontinue it, that will stop. The cons, though, are that we'll be less multimodal if we do this. That means we'll only have fixed route, and we'll also only have the water ferry. And then we'll also lose a service option. So with that, I'm done. I'll be happy to take any questions. Well, let me go to the conclusion first. Profit is extremely unlikely if we go ahead and continue with this. And there's also risk for all the competition that's coming in. Like I said, we have a first generation bike share system, and there's fourth and fifth generation out there right now that have a lot more resources at their disposal. But for minimal loss, we'd have to have 100% commitment and also have 100% sponsorship on all of our bikes and all of our stations. So with this, we recommend that we discontinue the bike share program. And now, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Weren't we doing something with the city with bike share?
Yeah, so we voted to give the bike share up to the city. I think it was 18 months ago, but they backed out.
It's a little more complicated than that. You discovered that there was no funding to buy bicycles.
Right.
Because CAT was supposed to provide the bicycles.
So, to my knowledge, it was FTA funding that we had originally, and then we weren't eligible for it. But any funding questions Grant can answer.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that agreement, the board passed it, I believe, in September of last year, and that was contingent upon expansion money that we were to secure with FTA, and FTA told us that we could not buy bikes with FTA money due to their regulations, so that agreement fell through.
Okay.
So, okay, Pete's next. Beverly's trying to get the...
How much money did we lose on the bike program? You said it was a loss. How much was the loss?
I'm not sure, but I get those numbers. I get back to the end of the day today.
Yeah, make sure so that we can see that, okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Did we use GDOT or CERTA or Go Transit grant funds for initially?
No. We applied for it, but that wasn't awarded. It was the buses instead of that.
Okay.
So the transit center station was paid for as part of the construction of this building. So it was a $52,000 investment that was grant funded by the FTA. I'm not sure if that's what you
I just remember there being some issue about shifting the cost of the stations. And I thought GDOT was involved, but maybe not.
So there's an FTA interest in the transit center station, but the city paid for the Ellis Square station.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jay, I think you raised your hand.
I'll hold to when we going to vote on this.
Okay, thank you, Adrian.
I got a quick question. Is there a possibility that we can make sure that we're getting data on whatever sort of private bike program might come into town?
That would be a question for the city. I know that they don't have any active conversations beyond that. They just have blocked everything coming in until they
then let me
write the
change that.
legislation.
An RFP that the city would do, would we be involved in that in any way?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Is that solid, or could that change?
What's that? I'm sure it could change, but like I said, we're one of only 2 transit companies in the entire country that do this. If we were to be involved and for us to be successful at it, it'd have to be 100%. So that'd be a discussion for our executive team and stuff like that. I can't answer those questions, but I'm sure somebody in the room could.
It's unlikely it would be an RFP. The model we're headed for is to create a set of regulations about how anybody that wanted to operate a dockless system, whether it's motorized scooters or bicycles or anything else, what rules they'd have to operate under, and then as long as they operated under the rules, they would just get a business license and do it.
as a private entity.
Right.
All right.
And just to expand on that, I think the idea is like why there's a temporary ban is to prevent these private companies from just dumping their bicycles in the city and folks leaving them like, you know, in the middle of the sidewalk, sometimes in the middle of the street. Cities are having big problems with this. And so it's my understanding that the city is trying to regulate these private operators by identifying certain locations where folks can park these bikes. So whether it be an existing parking spot on the street, they take that out maybe and like create like a bike corral, and that would be a specific location for folks to park their bike. And I'd hope that we were involved in that conversation as to where those bike corrals or bike parking locations are. You know, we'd obviously want them to be as close as possible to our bus stops.
Yeah.
For first mile, last mile issues.
And I will say, it's not just mentioned, as you just mentioned, the bikes in Nashville when we went to the convention. They didn't have bikes, but they had the motorized scooters, and these scooters were just laying all over town. I mean, when you walked back, they'd be just on the side of the curb, they'd be on the side of the building, they'd be just left everywhere. So I think that the city has a legitimate concern with not only the scooters, but having bikes just laying in the middle of Forsyth Park or the square. So I think it's a good step to sort that one out before we do this.
Don't we still have the capacity for bikes on all the fixed route buses?
We do.
We have bikes on all of them?
I think on all of our fixed route buses, that's all of them. We
But
have
not on like the Dodge shovels that are downtown?
They're on the Dodge
They're on those
shovels.
too, so we really are covering the bike part. If you
Yeah.
have your own bike, we're just not supplying the actual bike anymore.
Each of our buses
Okay.
have 2 bikes on there.
Okay. That we don't want to lose.
Yeah, of course.
People far enough away that biking to it's not a bad thing, especially downtown. Although I don't know if that's better or worse.
Okay, any more questions before we move on? We're going to obviously come back to this subject very shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is just a quick update by the board members that went to the after convention in Nashville. It's not going to be in great detail. It's really just, we're going to give you just a little bit of information to let you know what seems to be going on in the world of transit in North America. So as an introduction, I'll start, and then Bill's got a section he's going to talk about which deals with sort of the municipality part of this, and Clinton's going to give one on ballot measures, which was a very interesting section we sat through, and then Mike actually did the hard job, and he went through all the seminars involving safety or regulations and rules. So the rest of us kind of went as dreamers and looked at expansion and good things, and Mike took up the hard part. So the sort of the takeaway from this is that when you went to the sessions and you talked to people throughout the seminar, ridership everywhere in the United States is down. And the only people that seem to have ridership that is coming back are the people that completed a route redesign like we've done, and they've improved transit times, they've improved the service, they've just improved the system. Other than that, I think that I heard out of the 35 major cities in the United States, 31 of them has ridership has been down now for years. Everybody is looking really hard for the silver bullet, you know, the magical bullet which will fix everything. And there doesn't seem to be one solution for this. So the current thinking that came out of all the presentations, and I'm going to go through this real fast because Bill's going to spend more time on it, is that transit has to become a mobility provider. We're still the best solution to get a lot of people moving through a city fast with the least amount of congestion. But we don't do the first mile, and we need to supplement ourselves with Uber, Lyft, scooters, bike shares, or some other van pool system. And this seemed to be the topic that came up and over, and we need to use technology to do this. A lot of talk said about TNCs, bikes, scooters, and general transit expansions. But one of the sessions that I went to, which was really interesting, and this, I think when we do our legislative workshop, we'd like to bring up with Mike again, is we had a session with Uber and Lyft, and they sent some of the top people from Uber and Lyft in to give their sales pitch. And their pitch is that they can help transit, and they do help transit by making us do a better job. And they can work in the less dense areas, out in the suburbs, and they can take people where there is not a lot of transit options, directly from A to B, or they can take it to a transit hub. So they pitch themselves as being very pro-transit and willing to help. They also claimed that they are very willing to help lobby state legislatures to pass transit addendums, referendums, and laws. They have money, and they apparently have lobbyists, and they claimed, and this is a big stretch, that they will help pass some of these things. And apparently they did this, Mike, in San Francisco. They claim that they're not adverse to paying user fees. So in San Francisco, they're paying 3.5% of the fare for a single ride, or they're paying 1.5% for a shared ride. And they claim they'll willingly do these things. So San Francisco made $30 million on this event. I think I heard that Chicago made $13 million. And DC portion of the Washington Metro system has just put a 6% user fee in, and they're talking half a billion dollars they expect to get from these TNCs. So whether this is all true or just smoke remains to be seen, and they were challenged pretty aggressively by the head of the Washington DC Metro group that what they say is not true, because they're not out in the suburbs where it's dense, they're downtown with everybody else. And when they're downtown with everybody else, they're creating more congestion and more gridlock, because where a bus can take 60 people, now you've got 60 cars. And he challenged them also and willing to help with the fees and with the lobbying. And of course, the final statement was, and we will not share your data with us. So we don't really know where you are, what you're doing, or how big you are. So it was an interesting conversation. There was a lot of talk that I heard about APTA undertaking a 2018 multi-transit study. So they're studying within the major transportation areas of bigger cities. They're evaluating the roads for congestion. They're evaluating the transit systems, the bike paths, the sidewalks, and all the ways that people have to get from A to B. And they're getting ready to grade all the cities as to how they rate as a transit-friendly environment. This apparently is on its final steps. It's supposed to be released sometime in the not-too-distant future. Hanover, Germany, for example, in the same subject, you know, the Europeans always take it a step farther than we do. And they've now developed an app that controls all transit in Hanover. So if you want to take a bike share, if you want to take an Uber, if you want to take a train or a bus, their app has all of this built into it. And when you say you want to go from here to there, it figures out the best combination of events to get you from here to there. And your smartphone becomes your ticket to the bus, or it becomes your ticket to the bike share, or it becomes your ticket to the train. And you can even rent a car through the app. And somehow with the app, all the money magically goes to the right people. So I was thinking with our system, Curtis, this should just be a piece of cake. We could probably do it by the end of the year. And that's, I think that's where I'll stop, because we don't want this to be a long presentation. So Bill, do you want to pick up where I left off?
Yeah. It's a batch of just quick points I want to make that came out of the highlights that I remember or made notes about during the presentations. And the first most important thing Howard mentioned, this seemed to be a common theme in most of the presentations that I saw, is that transit is at a real crossroads. You know, with declining ridership all over the country, that, you know, there's got to be a new way of doing things. It was interesting because there seemed to be an idea gelling about what direction that might be in, and and I got a little perspective that I didn't have at the meeting on my way home. On the plane home, I was sitting next to someone who works for Route Match in Atlanta, and he was talking about how just last summer at a meeting, this same idea was being presented. The transit was at a crossroads, but no clear picture of what was going on. He said he felt like a lot of things had started to come together at this meeting. They're starting to see a lot of ideas about the direction things might move in. The thing that seemed to be most consistent in presentations is to quit thinking of transit as a bus system and start thinking of it more as an agency, a mobility agency that helps coordinate a variety of tactics, not just utilizing your own inventory, but how you manage these other modes that would be part of the grand system, the larger system. One of the best speakers I heard, and somebody was with me, I don't know if it was Howard or Clinton.
It's Howard.
But one of the panel discussions, it might have been Michael, but this guy is head of the Kansas City transit system and went blind about 6 years ago, and started off talking about, you think you understand paratransit until you need it. And then from that, he asked us to do a little exercise to close our eyes, for everybody to close their eyes. And then after everybody was sitting there with their eyes closed, he said, now reach over and shake the person's hand who's next to you. And there was a little uncomfortableness there for a minute, and everybody opened their eyes. And his next question was, how many of you touched someone inappropriately? It was a good exercise, certainly. But one of the reasons I remember this particular presenter was at one point he just really kind of threw out, do you want to be the manager, or do you want to run a bus system, or do you want to run a transit agency? And so I think that's where things really seem to be headed, and certainly from APTA's point of view, that you've got to become the coordinator of all these activities, not just the operator of a bus fleet. In coordinating that first mile, last mile especially. A couple of other points that came up in terms of this is incorporating rideshare at multimodal centers, making space available for that to happen. The Robin Chase video, and did we share that with everybody? I can't remember, but Clinton found at the last breakfast, the last general session breakfast we had, Robin Chase made a presentation. She is one of the co-founders of Zipcars and was the CEO of Zipcars, and it was an absolutely terrific presentation, just talking about all aspects of transportation. And this is a terrible reproduction of a slide that she had up, but if you'll pass these around, one of the things that they talked about was, or she talked about, was these shared mobility principles for livable cities, and these important points to be working toward. If we didn't get that link to everybody, we need to do that, and maybe even get it posted on the CAP site, because it was such a good presentation, a really good overview of transit today. One of the other things that came up several times in different panel discussions I was at was in partnerships. One of the essential elements of any partnership going forward is that you require data sharing from those companies. So whatever data they're collecting, in any partnership that they have with you, they have to share that data. They have to share that information. And that's certainly going to be something that the city does going forward with any of these companies that want to do dockless systems here. Another point that is of particular interest to me is how important language is. Just a couple of things that came up. There were more, but a couple of things in particular. One is to talk about TOCs instead of TODs, a transit-oriented community, not transit-oriented development. And by talking about it as a community, you make people the focus of the thing. In case, Hayden, I don't know if you or Randy, if y'all want any of these, there's a couple of them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But the idea that it's a community, not just a development. And we actually have an example. I mean, all communities have some kind of example of that. Our example here is the Thomas Square neighborhood where Clinton lives, because that was one of the original transit-oriented developments, the Thomas Square streetcar district, because the streetcar became available that's when we started getting suburban development. It's hard to think of Thomas Square as suburban now, but it was at one point. So just starting to change some of our terminology, like going to transit-oriented communities instead of transit-oriented development. And another one was to say multi-transit, not multimodal. I mean, when you talk about multimodal, you could be talking about almost any kind of field and just different aspects of that field, that industry. But what we are really focusing on is transportation, so trying to use the term multi-transit instead of multimodal. In terms of route redesign, a couple of things that were encouraging and cautionary. In Central Ohio, I think I got these numbers right. In Central Ohio, when they did a route redesign or system redesign for their bus system, they wound up getting a 9% increase in riders, which is good enough. But maybe the more important part of it was they had an 89% increase in the number of homes that were reached with the system, and they had a 71% increase in the number of businesses that were reached with the system. So that is, at least a kind of shining example of where I hope the direction certainly that we move into with our route redesign. The cautionary part was in Miami. Miami got a half-cent transit tax, and they were talking about what they had been able to accomplish, but also made the point that they had seriously overpromised what they could deliver for a half a penny. So one of the things, especially as we talk about going forward with any kind of SPLOST or other funding for this, we want to be a little cautious about the promises we make, because they've done a pretty good job in Miami from the way they talk, but the problem they're running into is they couldn't come anywhere near delivering the things that they had promised, and so the overall impact in the community is a kind of negative feeling. Even though they're getting better services, it's negative because they didn't get where they said they were going to go. Another thing I thought was interesting, because we do it so much here, is talking about ridership as our metric. And of course everybody in the country is losing ridership. So basically if we use that as our single metric, all transit systems are failing. The point that a couple of presentations made is ridership is probably not the metric we should be using to talk about what we're doing and how well we're doing. Other metrics that we can point to, but things that are more about service, what kind of service we provide in the community, where we provide it, that sort of thing, is probably stuff that we should be talking about more than constantly bringing up this thing as our main focus, which is negative, consistently a negative. So just changing the kind of metrics we use to talk about what we're doing and how well we're doing, and to try to communicate to the community more. Something else, and these last couple of points are really more municipal points rather than transit points. But you talked about curb appeal and how you deal with just transportation in general within the city, and curb appeal, and the fact that, and we're certainly guilty of this here, that we don't value the curb properly. I mean, it kind of ties in with what Howard mentioned about how we value transit. One of the things Robin Chase pointed out in her presentation, for instance, is if we talk about congestion pricing in a community, in New York, when they talk about congestion pricing for transportation, the first thing they did was they eliminated all personal vehicles from having to pay for congestion pricing. Well, the personal vehicles and the volume of personal vehicles are the biggest problem with congestion, but to take them out immediately, makes it a more difficult problem to solve. And then the question is, if you're going to charge licensed personal vehicles, whether it's TNCs or taxis or whatever it might be, limos, how do you distinguish those from personal vehicles, and why would you anyway? They're both a car, just a car using that roadway. And as part of that, she also pointed out how we tend to value one vehicle as one unit, period. Whether it's one personal automobile with one person in it or a bus with 30 people in it, we put the same value on that. And that's another concept, perception we need to start trying to change. And then just how we price the curb and taking into account things like complete streets programs. Is that curb access more important to freight, more valuable to the community for freight, for single car parking, metered parking, for bus lanes, and just starting to think more and more in terms of how we actually use our municipal right-of-ways. And of course, bike share stuff that Aiden was talking about is gonna be a big part of that too. I started out being very supportive of CAT and the city working in a bike share program. I would absolutely not vote for any government to be involved in that today. We simply cannot respond at the speed that private companies can. Just like Aiden was saying, they're on generation 4 now, and we're still dealing with 1. We'd never catch up. We'd never be able to stay caught up. So I think that the real key for municipal governments is the way we manage the right of way in terms of what we charge for access to it, rather than trying to actually provide services ourselves. That's it for me.
Before we move on to Mike, comment on Kansas City, because I was with you.
That was you and I. Yeah, I think I touched you inappropriately.
Yeah, I think so. I meant to talk to you about that, but wanted to talk to Ty first. The other thing that the guys from Kansas City said that was interesting, but it's a different subject, is they have partnered with hospitals to get grants from the VA. And the trade that they're making is the hospitals are getting some sort of a grant that apparently we don't access because we're not in that line of work. And they trade the grant off for free passes for the homeless or the vets. So this apparently, it could be a source of grant funding for us moving forward as we talk more about partnerships with the hospitals and healthcare providers. Just a few of the thoughts.
Along that line, I think it was the same part of that they were, I think you picked up on some of this too, about working with nonprofits. There was another presentation that talked about working with nonprofits. So instead of these various agencies picking up passes that they're handing out to people, they actually, individual ride passes, they actually create a system where using grant money, they're able to provide somebody an annual pass or just a more convenient, more efficient system of working.
That's a great segue. Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll catch Mike at the end.
All right, well, I wrote a little book, y'all, and I've got some for you people up here at the tables. There you go, Pete. Take one, pass it down. And here you go. This book is published at Starlandia, New News Art Supplies. It's called Clinton's Short Guide to Transit Ballot Measures, Positioning for Future Success. So this is
You have way too much time on your hands.
I did this very quickly. I do this a lot. I don't have that much time. But I thought it was helpful because I think this is really important. APTA, by design, is very much sort of a forward-looking organization that I think delves into a lot of theory and practice and philosophy of where transit's going. And there was a lot of really interesting work done and conversations had about sort of future things. And I would absolutely echo the sentiment that transit in America is kind of at a crossroads and we don't really know what's going on. What I kind of took away from this is it's a return to values of what we do know what transit is about, and it's about moving people around to the communities and to the resources that they need. So, I went to a really interesting conversation about ballot measures. It's called Transit Ballot Measures, Positioning for Future Success. I'd like to flip that upside down, so it's Positioning for Future Success, and then the subtitle would be Transit Ballot Measures, because if you don't do the first one, there's no chance to do the second one. What was kind of interesting, I thought they put this together really well, is they had 3 people on stage and a moderator. They had somebody from LA Metro, they had somebody from Nashville, and they had somebody from Las Vegas. In very recent history, LA Metro passed a huge, what was it called? Amendment M, something like that?
Measure M.
Measure M. Measure M. That passed very successfully. In Nashville, they had a ballot measure which failed miserably, and Las Vegas has one coming up. So I thought it was a really special treat for us and kind of an unfortunate situation for Nashville that we were able to see as an audience a successful one, an unsuccessful one, and a pending ballot measure. So kind of to jump into some details that I thought were interesting about all 3 of these. The LA Metro was very impressive in what they were able to put together. They passed a half-cent sales tax with no sunset. Basically, that's incredible. I also thought the way that they talked about it is they never said this is a forever tax. They always said, you voters will have the chance to end this when you want. They never, and I think that's to echo the sentiment on communication. Communication is huge. They could have easily said, and it would have been just as accurate, this tax will never end, but they don't say that. they say, we're giving you the power to pull this tax back, when you decide. It was very sophisticated in the research and the marketing that they did. They used very, I think, direct Facebook ads and social media. They did a lot of testing about language, talking about congestion. Would that be more effective than talking about emissions? And they found that it changes for different audiences, and they directed those messages to where they needed to go. Also for this one, the mayor was the face and spokesperson of this, and he kind of went out there into the city a lot and pushed for Measure M to go through. What I also thought was kind of cool about LA Metro is that they had a lot of humanity and humor in this referendum. A ballot initiative is kind of complicated and a little bit sort of maybe super dull and not the most exciting thing, so how do you make it exciting? So they would hand out M&Ms because it was Measure M. And they would go to sports games and talk to people there and meet people on the ground. Even though it's this enormous project, they would meet people on the ground consistently. I thought that was pretty cool. Nashville MTA, they had a $5.4 billion plan to raise 4 different taxes and generate all that money to do a fairly large project. Unfortunately, that failed 64-36, which was pretty surprising for Nashville. I think everybody, the Chamber of Commerce, all the establishment of Nashville was very keen on this moving through, and it did not. What was interesting about Nashville is they had a mayoral scandal, basically I think like a month and a half before this initiative passed, which definitely kind of rocked the boat, which makes it difficult to figure out why did this ballot not pass? Was it the actions of the mayor? Maybe probably a little bit, or was it just the initiative itself? When they kind of did research after the fact, they found that, I can't remember the exact percentage, but more than 50% voted not against the tax, but against the plan, which I think is very interesting, is that a lot of citizens felt like this plan was too big for what they call Nashville MTA to actually pull off. They would be fine having that money raised if it was going to be put into a plan that the citizens felt would actually be possible, but a lot of them felt like it was not. What was also interesting is they used an outside firm to manage this campaign. I'm not sure if that's different than LA, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. And they also had a broad coalition of support, which LA also did. LA did a really good job. And then, so there was also a woman from Las Vegas who was talking about their upcoming ballot referendum, initiative, whatever we're calling it. What she kind of was talking about was they felt like concerns from citizens about why are we investing in transit when we don't really know what the future of transit looks like, which I thought was kind of a fair point, but also the other two folks from Nashville and LA kind of were like, it's still, there's some really core stuff that we can all definitely agree needs to happen. So I just threw that on there. Again, from LA, because I'll repeat, they did a really good job. Basically, they identified 6 elements that you need to pass a referendum. Having any less than one of these may put you in jeopardy. So real quick, community groups. You've got to have a community group that can fight for you, because you can't fight for yourself. That's illegal. The second one is political will. Is there any? You also need a broad and strong coalition, and I'll go into what broad and strong means. It's 2 very different things, but you need everybody on your side, because there will be plenty of other people that aren't interested in any of this. You also need a professionally done campaign. It needs to look good, it's got to be sexy, it's got to be interesting, it's got to be well done, well targeted. This is a political campaign. Who here has run for office? Great. So you guys know what I'm talking about, because this has to be at that level or above of what Savannah is used to if we have any chance of trying to get this going. You also need fundraising efforts and lobbying efforts. In LA, the Chamber of Commerce took on the fundraising, generated I think like, what was it, $4-5 million to push this forward. This is not going to be an inexpensive endeavor for any transit system that wants to do it well and have it actually pass. So I think one thing to think about is how does CAT create, if we don't have, and grow or nurture any of these 6 elements. And I think we really got to think about what do these look like for us today, where are they, and how do we grow them. So that kind of moves me into the second part, sort of what the takeaways that I had, is that we need to be proving our value today as a transit system if we are interested in having the community invest more in us in the future. I have 3 recommended actions that I would like to sort of like get going. I'll just say those right now. The first one is we need to figure out where we are now. We need to do our due diligence. If we were going to be selling a house or improving a house, how much is the house worth? How do we feel about the house? What does the House of Transit look like in Chatham County? How many people write it? If you don't write it, how do you feel about it? Do you support it? We don't know. But we need to figure that out because that will define how we move forward. The second one would be we need to partner with organizations, lots of organizations. There's a list on the back of this with just organizations that I know personally that would probably be okay to sign up for some sort of partnership. I'm not really sure what that looks like, and I want to be very certain that I'm not talking about changing routes to please these partners. It's more about just, I think, probably taking the time to reach out and say, hey, we're a transit system. We're here to help move your people to where they need to go. The second one is cultivating transit champions. These can be people, these can be organizations. Hint, hint, Savannah Bicycle Campaign would be fairly akin to, I think, the closest thing we have now for a transit champion. They're out there every day, slogging in the mud, writing articles, hitting people on Facebook, talking about transit, multimodal options. They can say things that we can't. So they represent the strong part of the coalition, whereas all the other organizations represent the broad part of the coalition. So you kind of got a bell curve. We're going to have a lot of broad and not many strong, but they complement each other well. And so then action principles are just kind of like, how do we do all these things? We'll do them enthusiastically, we'll do them boldly, we'll do them compassionately, and with a bit of humor. Notice it's not 0.4, it's not the 4th point, it's 3.5. Safety and professionalism are not action principles because I think they should be so embedded in what we do that we really don't have to say that we're doing them at all. So enthusiasm is we need to be excited about this. We are asking people for, or we will hopefully in the future be asking people for a lot of support. Why would they want to support that? If we're not enthusiastic about it, well then why aren't we? We also need to be bold. Times are changing and Savannah is growing and transit we don't really know. So I think taking bold steps and asking for bold requests is something that we should consider. And then we also need to do it compassionately. We're human. People that we're serving are human, and everybody in between that is a human person with hopes and lives and dreams, something we should consider. And also people just like having fun. Humor needs to be embedded in all of this. If we take ourselves too seriously, that can also be problematic. But we got to also take ourselves seriously. Seriously. This will be successful if we let people see themselves in the success of their transit system. They may not ride transit ever, but if they see themselves as being part of that success, that's how we get them. People vote with their hearts, they don't vote with their minds. We need to capture them that way. Again, I would say like this really just goes back to kind of like campaigning 101 for anything. We're literally, if a ballot would go through, trying to get people to vote for something on a ballot, in a box, at a polling station. But if we focus on that, I think the worst thing that we could do is just be like, oh, we need to have a ballot referendum, time to make ourselves look good, and then the ballot passes, and then we just kind of don't. And it's like, all these aspects need to go. That's why I'm flipping this talk around, is that we need to be positioning for future success at all times, not just in when we've got a ballot measure on the horizon, but at all times. We need to all the time being positioning ourselves for future success and realizing that that means we're kind of shifting at some points. Great quote from a book called How to Move a Mega Ballot. What's it called? This is from that book that you sent me.
Human Transit?
No, not Human Transit. Anyways, after LA passed their thing, they wrote a book about how they did it. And this is a quote from the introduction. We often get asked, how did you do it? In short, the success of Measure M can be attributed to a collaborative bottom-up process, early strategic planning, a broad and strong coalition of support, a widespread and robust public education program, and bold leadership from Metro Board and Metro staff. LA did a very good job. If we have any interest in doing this, I say we take some time to look at what they did and basically kind of like replicate it here. We're much smaller, but all cities share fundamental, similarities. So then again, on the back, these are just organizations that, I'm fairly familiar with and that I know. I've shaken hands of people that run on these boards or are executives of. I know that between the rest of us on this board, this list could be 10 times longer. I really think that could be sort of like a really great goal for our board, sort of as we're asking ourselves, how do we help CAT, is that we help foster these partnerships and sort of funnel them into whatever the appropriate source is here at CAT to find the best way to partner with them. Are we teaming up with a hospital to provide, to help them legitimize a grant to provide free rides for all the veterans in Savannah? I think also something to realize is that CAT could be a very legitimizing partner for a lot of fairly small organizations. Shelter from the Rain works with folks to make sure that they're okay and that they're safe. They're a really small organization. For them, partnering with CAT would be a huge deal. If we could be trading data and they are able to basically pay us maybe a small fee at the total up front of a year-round pass or a monthly pass for the people, for their clients, now we start realizing, okay, very cool. We're getting more ridership. We're getting ridership that actually needs us. And really all that we did is just took a little bit of time to help put the bolts together. So my last point too is that these relationships, well, not really my last point, these relationships should be as important to CAT as regular engine maintenance. We have hardware, which is the buses, the floors, all of this air conditioning we're enjoying. And I think we need to start working on the software a little bit more. And the software is the people that are riding the bus around. And I think it's crucial that we spend some time really thinking about this. If we want to move forward and we want to be successful, if we want to have the community invest in us more, we need to invest in these partnerships. I think it's one of the most inexpensive ways to do this, and I'm interested to sort of see how we can move forward as a board and what leadership we can provide to staff to make this happen. And then a couple other things that I thought were interesting. APTA was really cool, so everybody should go. I was really had a really good time, and a lot of very interesting talks. I would also say, just as a theoretical thing that I've been thinking about, capitalism has this, it kind of eats things, and it's currently eating mobility. And I think that's what we're going through right now, is we're seeing the commodification of movement happen at a very rapid pace. Scooters, bikes, bike share, Uber, Lyft. Private industry will be able to provide movement to people very efficiently at a very low cost, and they will only get better at that. So as we start defining kind of who transit is, not only for ourselves, but this is a worldwide conversation, I think it makes sense to make it our business to know where people are going and how, all people. So I would absolutely hope that as we move forward with the bike share, that we get some data back in return. It would be ideal if Uber and Lyft would provide us their data. So we can start thinking about how do people move in Chatham County and how can we help that. I think that's all. That's all I got. All right, thanks. You can keep these books; they're free.
Nice job.
Let's let Mike talk first.
Where do we want to go? As Howard said, I got to go to all the boring ones. 2 on safety management systems, which the FTA has changed the rules. You have to be in full compliance by July 20th of 2020, and Mike told me we have already started on that. Went to one on workforce development, which ties into the LA presentation. They actually have developed a high school for transit. They bring people in, they teach them about the transit system, and not just bus driver, mechanic, all the parts of it. The appeal is to try to attract millennials to the transit systems, because there are a lot of jobs and they don't have enough people to fill most of them. The other one I went to is the Federal Legislative Overview, which was completely off the record. They said no note-taking, don't take any pictures. They had the legislative aides from the two committees on each side, the ranking member and the chairman. Obviously, they completely disagree on everything about transit. One says we do, one says we don't. So basically, nothing came out of that other than they have things in the works. And then I went to the one on building a better board, which is what this book was generated from. It was how boards interact with the CEO and back and forth. A lot of good information in this, and I know Howard's going to talk about it later on. And what was the other one? There was one more I missed. I will think of it in a minute. No, that's basically it, because most of them had little or no note-taking. The two good ones was that morning breakfast.
Yeah.
Was Chase. And we definitely have some ideas, but we do have to think about changing our focus. I know AARP now has a group on livable cities, and they check on 8 paradigms to make their evaluations, and one very large one is the transit. And they're checking, and you can apply for that somewhere down the road when we're in a better position to do that. But they have lecture series going out, and they're doing a lot of rating of places, and they tell people where they should move because of issues like mobility. So there's a lot we can do. Of course, we have to fund what we want to do. So we'll see how we go in the future. That's it for me. No handout, sorry. I only got this one.
Okay, well, that was a fairly short summary of the 2.5-day conference. And as Clinton said, it was really, really interesting. And you really, when you come out of these conferences, you realize, or I at least always think, how far Savannah, Chatham County has to go to really embrace a world-class transit system, or really mobility as a total package. Because when you go to these things, you always have a mayor or some other elected official that is pushing hard, and they have a plan in place, and they know where they want to go, and they're worried about congestion, and they're worried about who's operating, and they've just got everything, I think, more laid out than we do. And that was the purpose we brought Charles Siskin a couple years ago, was to help generate this kind of thinking process to move forward with these partnerships that Clinton touched on, and just to have more of a transit mobility plan. But it was really, really good. And the next one coming up, Beverly, I think, is November 26th through the 29th in D.C.
It's Sunday through to Friday. Let me see. We'll leave on the 25th.
You know, Dietrich Clinton has given up his seat if you'd like to go. And I think it would be good for you to go to get exposed to this.
That'd be fun.
Not forcing you to do it, but it would be good for you to do it, and I think you'd learn a lot. So if there's no
I just
comments,
wanted to make a comment about one thing Clinton was talking about in soliciting broad support in the community, and you made the point, everybody, not just bus riders. One of the things I bumped into as I try to talk about fewer cars downtown is the person who's never going to ride transit, who always wants their car, probably an older person. But even for them, there's a way to encourage their support of transit, because if you never want to get out of using your personal vehicle, the more other people you can get using transit, the easier it is for you to continue to use your private vehicle. So there's a benefit to everybody, even somebody that's never going to ride transit, to having a better transit system. And instead of trying to tell people they need to change their attitude about using transit, sometimes the best thing to do is just point out to them how if they can just get other people to use transit, that'll be good for them.
okay, then let's carry on then, Curtis, and go to the action items. First up is the bike share.
Right, so Aiden gave us a presentation on the pros and cons of bike share, and so really what staff
looking to do is have the board make a decision on if we should continue the bike share program under the circumstances we're in now, the challenges that lie ahead, or to discontinue the program altogether.
Okay, at this point, we're going to move for a discussion on the bike share programs. We need a first and a second.
Move to discontinue.
Second.
Okay, do we have any discussion on this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if that's up yet.
Go in there.
Oh, there you go. I'm gonna take me off.
After our meeting last week Tuesday, I went and did some research and went by the Metropolitan Planning Committee office. It's 2 pages. Keep both pages and pass it. Metropolitan Planning Commission, and did some research. Now, we said as far as federal funding is concerned, Federal Transit Administration funding is concerned, it cannot be used for anything else.
The Federal Transit Administration has
Tab.
told us
Give me one
that
minute.
we cannot use FTA money for the purchase of the bikes.
All right. So if you look at the first page from May 20, 2014, from the Metropolitan Planning Commission, on behalf of us, it states that it had a Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration have initiated a procedure that would allow the transfer of obligation authority to the receiving agency. And I'm not going to read all that because I'm not going to use all my time. So how is that in conflict with what you just stated, sir?
So the way the process worked was there was some funding through the MPO that we applied for back in, I want to say it was 2013 or 2014, and we were selected at the local level to get this project for bike share expansion underway. And once it was selected, the money originated at Federal Highways. And when we were selected, the MPO and GDOT authorized a flex from Federal Highways to Federal Transit Administration. Because we're a Federal Transit grantee, that's why the flex was initiated, because we already have the back office set up with FTA.
So if the flex was initiated, but we're saying we can't use FTA funding, I'm lost. So
yeah,
here's my mind there.
Right, and this predates myself. When we applied for the money, many years ago, we probably should have done better research on the regulations. Nobody at the MPO level knew about that regulation, and we have the email from FTA stating that we cannot use FTA money for bike share, and they specifically mentioned the regulation.
Even with this right here that we went through, we still can't do it.
Right.
Because well, then I need to get a letter from FTA stating that this is null and void. Then. Because basically what you're stating is this is null and void.
It is.
And this is
correct.
I mean, did we not proceed on the TIP, or did we not move forward on it, or?
The project is still in the TIP until the board discontinues the project, in which case we would then, later today or tomorrow, go to the MPO and say, please remove this project from the TIP.
So in essence, what we're doing is if we vote no on this, then we save ourselves on this, what you're saying?
Well, not exactly. If we vote no on this, basically what we're saying is we do not want to be the bike share provider anymore, because we don't have funding and because we're about to face competition in the private sector.
And what you're saying is, so when I research this, they're going to come back to me and say there's no funding. Because after I vote on this, I can't re-vote it. I have to go through the process of re-voting.
The money in that memo was flexed over from Federal Highway to FTA, and at that point, Federal Highway and the MPO are out of the picture. We tried to have the money flexed back to Federal Highway, and we have a note from Federal Highway saying we do not approve this. It has to stay with FTA. So it's an unfortunate situation that the money got flexed and that we applied for the funding in the first place. We probably shouldn't have. But
okay.
It is what it is.
My next question is, this is an intermodal center. Once we cut the bike share program, because I thought we already cut this back in September of 2017. When we cut this program, what is the contingency to keep us an intermodal organization as far as this building is concerned? Anybody can answer the question.
Greyhound.
Yeah.
Well, Greyhound is still buses, so it's just buses traveling a further distance. That's just like a highway versus a national highway. Both of them are still highways.
This is out of our control to some degree, but when the private sector does enter the market, if we are involved in the regulations with the city of Savannah, we could potentially require that one of the bike share parking locations is still at this facility in that exact same spot.
And how aggressive have we gone out? Did it get private individuals or private organizations to partner with us as far as the bike shares program is concerned since 2014?
They've already approached the city of Savannah, and the city of Savannah is writing their regulations right now.
But they're just writing regulation. But my question was, how aggressive have we gotten as far as, because how I look at it, an organization needs to be in control of the bike share. Whether Savannah wants to do it or not, I can't say that. But if you just start putting private entities all over the place, putting bike shares up, and no regulation, I mean, I guess Savannah's trying to put regulations together or not. But if you do that, then you're going to have those bikes like in those other places where they just lay the bike down and don't return the bikes and all the other stuff. I think some kind of entity needs to be in charge and keep control of what goes on with that bike share program.
Right, and that's going to be the city of Savannah's role.
But my fact was, last year we gave this, well, it leads to my next question. We gave this to the city of Savannah by MOU, memorandum of understanding.
Right.
Last year we gave it. City of Savannah did absolutely nothing with it.
Right, and we talked about this briefly earlier. I don't think you were in the room. The MOU that was passed by the board in September 2017 was contingent on us receiving those funds for bike share expansion, which later on, maybe a couple months later, the FTA told us that we could not use those funds for bike share expansion, and that's when the deal fell through. So no, the city of Savannah never signed that MOU.
Yeah, I understand they didn't sign it,
right.
But you're asking me to say, you're telling me that they didn't sign that MOU, but if we vote this down, all of a sudden city of Savannah is going to be interested in the bike share program. I just don't get it.
They're regulating it. So the private sector is coming into a lot of cities, and this is everywhere pretty much, and they're dumping bikes all over the city. And it's not a good situation for the municipalities. As you mentioned, bikes are winding up in the road, on sidewalks, in areas that they shouldn't be. And so the more progressive cities are starting to regulate the bike share programs and the scooter programs operated by the private sector to make sure that the placement where the bikes are physically parked is in a location that the city has specifically identified. So in the city of Savannah, I think the plan is Parking and Mobility Services Department will probably identify maybe some parking spots in the city, and they will remove those parking spots and make those dedicated bike share or scooter parking facilities. And so that's where we would maybe come into play, is if we are a part of that conversation where those locations are for bike and scooter parking, then we can try to make them very close or really right next to our bus stops to allow folks who want to use those private scooters and bikes, give them that opportunity.
I mean, I think 2014 or whenever we came up with this, we came with the contingency of trying to be ahead of the growth curve. And I think somewhere down the line, we dropped the ball. Because for us to be in stage 1 as far as bike share is concerned, and they're stage 4, and I've been in Nashville, saw the bike share program, I've been in Los Angeles, saw the bike share program. So I've seen bike share programs in other counties and other places. And 2 members of this board voted to make sure that this happened. And so my thing is, I think we dropped the ball on this bike share program. And I think, and I'm even more upset the fact that we voted an MOU on this last year, 2017, September. And this is the first time hearing anything about, because in my mind frame, I'm thinking the bike share had been turned over to the city of Savannah to manage, hold, whatever they needed to do. And now to hear this in this discussion that we're dropping the program, I'd already thought we had voted on this last year. And nobody can change my opinion on that, because I know I sat here and I had a conversation about this bike share program.
Yeah.
And we still voted to put the MOU over there. And if they never signed it, we should have knew about this not a year later, but much, much sooner. And
Yeah.
so I just want to leave my contingency points at that, and I finish my discussion at that point.
Okay, and just quickly to address that, we probably should have come to you guys sooner, saying that this, the MOU with the city didn't work out, and that the funding didn't pan out either. We wanted to do our due diligence and do some background research as to what it was going to take to discontinue the program. We didn't know what we were gonna do with the assets. We didn't know what other cities were doing with their formerly publicly owned bike share programs. So we had to do a little bit of research on our end so that we could come to you guys for a recommendation.
But a year worth of research is too long, man. And like I said, I yield my time. I'm done.
Okay, Bill, you've got,
52 seconds.
well, we'll start you over again at 3 minutes, to be fair.
Just a couple of points. People keep talking about how the city did this or did that. The agreement that the city was willing to sign was that we would take over operations and maintenance. The equipment would be provided. The equipment we discovered couldn't be provided, and I think we've actually had a variety of discussions over this issue about whether or not FTA money. I mean, this isn't the first time this has come up. We've talked in the past about the issue of whether FTA money can be used or not. So, maybe we should have been talking about discontinuance sooner, but it's not the first time that we've talked about this. The other thing, this document that you brought here, I think you need to read it a little closer, because it says the funds being transferred to FTA are for a variety of transit improvements. Fixed guideway projects, bus purchases, construction and rehab of rail stations, maintenance, facility construction, renovations, alternatively fueled bus purchases, bus transfer facilities, multimodal transportation centers, and advanced technology fare collection systems. It doesn't say anything about bicycles here. It could have been included if it was an option, but all FTA has said in terms of all of this that I'm aware of is that the money can't be spent on bicycles. So this is not void at all. This is still a good agreement for all of the things that the FTA money can be used for. It's just that one thing, at least so far as we've discovered, that the money can't be used for. So there's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing in here that is contradicted by what's been going on.
Okay, Jay.
All right. Since you said that, I spoke directly to the person who wrote this memo, and they stated it could be used for bike share. So I just want to make sure I clear that point up. The person who wrote the memo actually stated that it could be used for bike share.
What person?
It's on the back. Just read, sir.
Well, there's Raymond Robinson.
Ramon Robinson is the person I spoke to.
Okay. Well,
yes, sir.
She works.
He
works.
He used to work here.
CAT. Okay, so he doesn't work here anymore.
No, sir. But he's the one who wrote this memo, and he was writing this memo.
And he's not on MPO, and he's not with the FTA.
All right, so we're going to discuss on my time. So we're going to discuss on my time. He's not on MPO. He's not on MPA. However, he was a former employee of this organization, and he was writing this on behalf of Bike Share Program.
This doesn't say anything about bikes.
Yeah, but it was part of the program he was
It doesn't
writing
say
for.
anything about bikes, and you're saying that this
It doesn't
is not
matter if
valid.
it does. If it doesn't matter, it doesn't. It still states the fact that we can transfer funds from one agency to the other. But guess what? Y'all just told me today in this meeting that we couldn't do that before this document.
No, the funds are transferred.
No, it was stated today we can't transfer some of those funds.
No, it says we can't use the money.
Oh, we can't.
for
I'm
bike
sorry.
purchases.
I apologize for the language. You can't use it. However, it was
The money
stated
is-
that
the money is transferred. We asked to transfer it back, and we were told no.
Well, I understand.
Am I misunderstanding, or am I misstating
No,
that?
that's right.
That's fine.
When we transferred the money, when MPO transferred the money, and then we discovered that we couldn't spend the money on bicycles, we asked if we could transfer the money back to an
So it was
agency
stated
that
we couldn't
would.
spend money on bicycles. That's what we're saying now.
Right.
Okay. I'll get those documents. That's fine.
Okay, no further, no, Tabitha.
Well, I just have a question. If there was all this conversation, where'd that happen?
I don't remember none of that conversation.
It didn't happen in here. I mean, that seems like a lot of conversation that you might have got.
If
left
everybody
out.
not included in it.
So, that took place over what time?
I personally can't answer that question
All of
because
this,
I'm
this has
with
been
you
going
guys.
on since 2014, and it's been an ongoing conversation with FTA, Federal Highway, MPO, and GDOT, and CAT, and there've been multiple folks at GDOT, FHWA, FTA, and CAT involved in it because of turnover. So it's been a giant headache, to be honest.
Oh.
But it's a giant headache that ain't been
But-
shared with everybody. I'm done.
You're
Sorry,
you're the
Cap.
speaker. I mean,
That's the question.
Okay, well, what
I
I'm-
spoke the question.
Okay, and I said I can't answer the question. What I'm hearing from this, and remember, I'm a board member too. I get the same information that you do. So if you're not hearing it, I'm not hearing it.
So, okay.
So I just want to get past this. There is no secret conversation that
I
I've been
didn't
involved
say,
in. So-
before you get testy.
Okay.
I didn't accuse you of having a secret conversation. What I said was, there was a lot of conversation about this particular subject that was not necessarily shared. And when did the conversation happen? Was it a year ago? Was it before we came on? You know, it's a lot.
It sounds like, what I'm hearing, this is what it sounds like to me, in 2014, correct me whenever I say something wrong, we felt that we could use FTA money for a bike share program. Since 2014, the FTA has apparently told us, and we've got an email from them, that we cannot use FTA money for bike share programs. So I think we've moved from the point where we thought we could, to now we found out that we can't. And your question is, should they have come forward to us probably sooner and said, we've got a real problem here with this bike share program, we can't get the funds? It sounds to me like it should. But at this point, I mean, I think where we are with it is that it's not a viable program, from what I think any of us can tell. And it doesn't seem to me that there's a way to carry on with it without losing more money and investing a fair amount of effort. So that's the take I'm getting from hearing this conversation for the first time, is we thought we could, now we can't. And I think we're making a big point out of the fact that in 2014, we got something that said we can do it. But between 2014 and today, we know that we can't. And so this is where we are. And the city has taken, I think, as I'm hearing it, the driver's seat on this kind of project, because they want to control where the bicycles go, knowing that we're moving from a fixed platform to a docking arrangement. And everything we heard today and everything I heard last 2 weeks ago in Nashville was the private industry is moving quicker and better at this kind of operation than we're ever going to be. And somebody I heard made the comment that there's only 2 agencies left in the country that actually do this.
We're one of them.
And we're one of them, so there's somebody else involved. So I think the question for us is, do we want to stop this now, or do we want to keep going? I mean, rather than arguing about what happened between 2014 and today, I think our question is, do we want to stay with this or back away from it? So I think that's the question. So I would say, let's call for a vote.
I move we discontinue the bike share cap program.
Do we have a second?
You were the second already.
Yes, I can.
Do we have first and second, Beverly?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay, so let's go ahead and vote.
Why does it have me listed as a move?
That's what I thought.
So what are we doing with the bicycles?
We're gonna throw them away, so give them away somewhere. Trade them to art. Probably give them to the art department across the street.
Everybody's waiting on Pete.
The old guys driving cars up the street. That's definitely me.
That's too fussy to be out already.
Look where I live.
Okay, we are all in. We have 7 yes and we have 1 no and 0 abstainers. So motion passes. Okay, next action item. So the next action item is a marketing services RFP. So can we have a motion to open discussion on this? We have a first. Do we have a second to open a discussion on the
Second.
marketing? Okay, we have a first and a second. So Curtis.
So staff requests the board to approve issuance of an RFP for on-call marketing services, also for system map, route scheduling, signage design, and printing services. We had existing contracts with on-call prior to this, which expired, so we basically want to issue it again.
Okay, we have Bill Durrance waiting to speak.
A couple of questions, mainly. Patricia, in the system development committee, you explained this a little bit, and it looks like, if I'm reading this correctly, that we're looking at two RFPs for two different types of service. Am I reading that right?
Yes, sir. What we'd like to do is kind of divide the tasks. The first would be definitely an on-call marketing services contract, similar to what you all approved in 2015, is my understanding. That would be general marketing activities, that might be website, that might be targeted marketing activities, photography. Examples of how the firms have helped us in the past is we used their assistance with special events. With the new bus event that we had in May, we called on them for those services. Within those three agencies that you approved before, there was one agency that claimed that they could do route schedules, system maps, and all of that. And I've looked at some of their materials, but around the country there are specialized groups who do transit information. They have professional cartographers on staff, and so I've asked the finance department if they basically could put the call out for those types of firms. And so that what will come back to us will be, hopefully, we'll be able to select on-call marketing firms for general activities, and then we'll have specialized companies who do system maps, route schedules, other wayfinding materials. They'll propose as well.
That would be the graphic design and printing services RFP?
Yes, like a full-service marketing firm can do brochures, general public information, that type of marketing materials. But as I said, the transit systems who do really great, route schedules and system maps, they employ some of the top firms in the country.
So this second one is a more specialized
yes, sir.
Agency that you're looking
yes,
for.
Yes, sir.
In those two RFPs, the on-call marketing and the graphic design, cover everything you need?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This would basically be, like the general marketing services is kind of what I consider an overflow contract. We will continue to handle these projects to the best of our ability internally, but there's going to be those times when we just can't manage every single thing, and so that's when we need to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody that's already on contract and say, hey, can you help us with this? Can you help us with this? Which is what we did with the special events regarding the new buses.
All right, thank you.
And we also utilized them when Jarrett Walker was in town. We needed the assistance of someone that could record Michelle's presentation to staff so that we could edit a video, put it on YouTube, and get it out. So again, we couldn't handle that. So we could pick up the phone to one of those marketing agencies and say, hey, we need videotaping assistance. And once everything comes back, usually there's a lot, we can request fees for what they will charge for every single task items. Like, we'll know what the rate is for photography, we'll know what the rate is for copywriting, we'll know what the rate is for graphics.
So the advantage to having this contract, once we agree to one, is that we're basically locking in these price points for 3 years.
Yes.
And we don't have to go through the FTA required procurement process every time that group needs to use the service.
How hard would that be?
It's easy, Mr. Durrett.
Yeah.
Okay, next speaker's Clinton, and then Pete's waiting, then Jay.
We're very visual people, everybody is. I think trust is made quickest with well-designed graphic design, good materials and whatnot. It's just almost instantaneous, and I think that's definitely something that I would always probably be in support of. And definitely with this, just a couple questions. Would any of this be for, let's say we're having a meeting for the system redesign, any graphic design needed to create maybe posters or social media elements, would that be useful? Would that be kind of tied into this?
Could be, but we think we have like in-house talent as well.
Mhm.
And so something like a poster, Sarah could handle that.
Perfect.
In-house, but the more complicated things. Or if Sarah has too much on her plate, then, again, this is a team of people that we can reach out and say, hey, we need some help with this. But for example, one of the tasks that we started with one of the agencies prior to the contract expiring was we asked them to brainstorm and pitch some branding names to us, for the system redesign effort, so that we won't just continue to call it system redesign. And so they're in that process now. This is basically a brand or a name that might be around 18 to 24 months, but that's things like that, to toss to a larger group to say, hey, can you help us with this?
Is there also the possibility of them creating sort of like templates that we can kind of plug into?
Absolutely.
All right, cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm very much in support of this.
Okay, then Pete.
Marketing services. Let me just tell you what happened here a few years ago. A few years ago, we wanted to see about talking to each one of the municipalities to get them to come on board to do a really good program in that. So one of the situations, I went to Garden City. I had all kinds of information, and especially about about how many people were in that area that might be considered in a low income, and some other things also. And then I had one of the members of that organization come up, oh, we don't have that. I said, you don't have anybody in your makeup of Garden City that is not on low income? And that individual said, no, we don't have that in Garden City. Well, that was absurd to begin with. I didn't want to get in an argument or anything with that. But on marketing services, I think what we, just a suggestion, is to put some different things now on marketing services that would help CAT altogether. For example, we've been talking about marketing services to help get the words out to the general public about the services that we have, what we can have, and things that are important. Because a lot of people don't understand that we've got a segment in our community that they need the transportation with CAT. They need to go to the doctor. They need to go to stores, to different other things, to go to work. And there's multiple things that the CAT can provide for the general public. So we really need a strong kind of message that we can put out that's really a good message that people will understand, that all of these different things can be brought out to the people. and in that. And I think we would have a better understanding with the people in our community. A lot of people in our community know how important it is. When you're talking about going to work, when you're talking about going to the doctor, when you're talking about going to the grocery stores, when you're talking about going to the department stores, things like that, that people, we got a number of people in our community just don't have the transportation. They don't have a relative, they don't have a neighbor or anyone to be able to take them to those particular items I just mentioned. So I think a good marketing services that really has really good information to the general public, that it will help, I think, the image of CAT.
I agree. Good points to remember.
Yes, we need all the tools we can.
Okay, Tabitha.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is this a local vendor?
We have no
We
idea.
haven't picked
We're gonna
one yet.
put out.
This is to pick one.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, basically, we're asking for you all to give us permission to go out, just to submit RFPs.
Okay.
So,
I can't hit a button because I don't have that option, but I would think that you're going to try to go local.
It's against FTA
Yeah.
regulations
Yeah.
to provide
Only thing you can go local
restrictions on
with.
geographic.
Yeah, only thing you can go local with,
Preference.
architectural and engineering and, legal.
now the contractors, the three that were approved before, one of them ended up being local vendor, one was in Florida, and one was someplace else. And so when I came on board and reached out to them, two of them were still willing to do work with us. But that's what we got before.
And FTA has loosened their geographic restrictions to some extent, but it's on certain types of contracts and certain types of procurements. But this RFP will go not only state but national, and will receive and evaluate all proposals that are responsive.
Okay, Jim, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I can't go on the speech clock somehow. So I think what you.
Alright, the only thing I really want to focus on, I said y'all can't put recommendations or requirements on it and stuff like that, but I want to echo what Pete said. I think a lot of times, Howard, when I first came on the board, you did a good job of it. You told us to take the bus pass, get on the buses, learn transit. I think a lot of us in CAT forget our base as far as people who ride the bus. And I make sure I walk out this door instead of walking out that door to make sure I get accustomed to walking along that platform to understand who our customer is. Now I understand we might want to go out there and find tourism and all these other people to be our customer, but our customer is on that platform. And they're usually economically challenged. They're usually from economic challenge, and they're all from black communities. And we have to put the elephant in the room. And when I get off the 27, it's black people getting on that bus on the 27. When I get on the 14, it's economically challenged people getting on that bus. And we talked about bike share earlier, how we lost the opportunity to private industry. We're going to lose ridership to private industry because Skadden started making its way onto the south side too. And I'm willing to say that. So when we're talking about marketing, we got to make sure that we're marketing to the right people and we're getting the right marketers. A lot of times we compare ourselves to Los Angeles or Cleveland or wherever else in the world. We need to find cities that are similar to Chatham County, Savannah, Georgia. And not just those opportunities just because we see it looks good and glamour. Because our client, our customer, are disenfranchised people. We can try to drum up whatever customer we want to drum up in the world. But disenfranchised people are our customer. And it's not the working class because we haven't been able to accept the challenges the working class goes through. So when we put advertisement out there, let's make sure we're challenging the working class, building a better system, and making sure we're taking care of those disenfranchised people. And that's all I had to say.
No, and it's an excellent point, Jay, to bring up, because we cannot forget our core riders that are the backbone of our system. So, and that's,
Right.
it's good to have that reminder once in a while that our challenge is our core.
Right.
group.
Targeted marketing, and then the presentation earlier about partnerships. You know, that's key. And there are groups out there that can help us, you know, hit those markets. But everything that we do, everything that we can do for the transit system will benefit our core riders as well as potential riders in my eyes.
I just feel we have forgotten our core riders. That's just my personal opinion. And I think we need to get back to the standard of understanding who our core ridership is.
I agree.
I think he's talking about in the pictures.
Yeah, yeah. And
I'm just talking about in pictures and in actual action.
Right. And then too, that's why the System Development Department, we have taken on an initiative where once a month as a group, we get out there and ride the buses so that we can make sure that we're in touch with our core riders. So that's why that's so important.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Clinton.
I totally agree, but I also would like to add that good information design is good information design, and I think hopefully that's something that can be hugely effective with this. I mean, our routes right now, the way they're printed, are kind of hard to read. So any advancement we can make on that will literally help everybody. So I think that's going to be hugely crucial. And then I'd also totally echo the sentiment on the social media. It is something that is fairly visible to all of us. And I think if that had maybe like a freshening up of a bit, that would be really cool.
Yeah, the people should look like the people.
Absolutely. And right now, currently we do not have a source where we do our own photography. So what Shalonda uses is a contract. So we get stock photos from different sources out there. And some of the ads that I've seen that they're producing, you know, I've seen people of color in there, and I appreciate that.
But I mean, it should be like students, and you should see like backpacks, and I mean, just stuff.
Yeah, but if we
a couple of pictures were like high-end business people drinking lattes
on an iPad.
Yep.
On an iPad with an expensive watch on. That ain't happening down there. It's just not happening.
But are y'all willing to accept when we go to that kind of demographic that represents that? Are we willing to accept the fallback that might come? Because it may be fallback on going after what I'm asking.
I don't think so. I think
I
think there's
different niche markets.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I could add something that might take like a multi-leveled into things as well is this whole idea of authenticity. I think we absolutely have a lot of space to be more authentic about who we are, who we move around, and showcase and celebrate that. I think doing a portrait series with some great photography of of people outside right now
would be great. I mean, why can't
we've done profiles like that.
When I say that, I have no problem accepting it.
Yeah.
Does everybody at the table have a problem?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't have a problem. I'm from here.
I mean, we should be able to partner with SCAD's photography department and get all kinds of photos that we want to get.
Well, if we get this contract, we can hire a photographer and line up photo shoots that we want. We can get releases from customers, releases from various scenarios around town, and we can have our own stock photos. But right now we use a service. Is that correct, Shalonda? But that's what a marketing, full-service marketing firm can offer.
Okay, where I'm going to pull us back a bit. We're beginning to drift off of the subject. Do we want to approve an on-call contract? We're beginning to drift off into a general discussion about marketing.
I only share my general comments because everybody else is sharing their general comments.
I know, I'm pulling it back. I think we've got a lot of comments shared. So Pete, why don't you be our final speaker? And then we'll go to this.
Okay, you see, just like Jay's talking about the core of our particular duty that we should have, but what we really need to do is just like I was talking about that one city. And that one city overall, there are really good people there. And Garden City is an important municipality there. and that was just one individual because they didn't understand things that was saying the things that they were saying. And so I think still that the marketing services should be part of this so that we can get those other municipalities on board with us when they really understand that people really in their areas need transportation because they have no other way to get it. And you can take, like on the west side where I've said this before, you can see people over there at 4 a.m. in the morning, 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning, walking from where they live to those big warehouses on the west side of town.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Pete, but can we speak to the subject of marketing?
I think that's what he's on.
I just want to make sure he's throwing marketing in there, so we.
Let's pull this back though. I mean, I think that, you know, these are conversations to have in system development, and it's hard to talk about marketing. So let's pull it back into voting for the RFP for online.
Move to approve the RFP.
Do we have a second?
Move to approve issuance of RFP.
And do we have a second issue? So then let's all go ahead and vote.
You say issuance or?
Issuance of an RFP.
We don't have them to approve.
Everybody waiting on feet. Okay, so we have 7 yes, 1 abstaining, and 1 no, so motion passes. Okay, then we're going to move on, Curtis, to the year 19 budget amendments. So can I have a first and a second to open discussion on this?
First.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second, so Terry, can you present this to us?
Sure.
And then we'll open for discussion.
Good morning. So after 3 months of financial operations, we've clarified and defined exactly what the employee choices were on the health, the dental, and retirement. So we were able to firm up our estimates, and there was some benefits there. And the actual tax digest is in. It was 0.8% higher than our estimate. So we've got about $237,000 in additional revenues that we are asking to be pushed to fuel expense because of the volatility of fuel this year. And so that's basically a summary of the amendment. Tax digest increase in any pickup in insurance pushed to fuel expense. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
We probably have one from Bill Durrance.
2, but I think you've answered the first one already. The revenue that we're gaining from the benefit adjustments, those are real numbers. That's not just speculation.
So when we budget, we don't know exactly what choices all of our employees are going to make when they choose their benefit package or their retirement percentage. And now that we've had 3 months of actual deductions for the choices they made, I've looked at all departments' expenses and projected that we're going to have that much of a positive variance at the end of the year based on the actual cost. Yes, sir.
My other question is, you figured out how much money that you're probably going to save from the projected budget in benefits, and how much you're going to get from the increase in the tax digest, and you've come up with $237,426.
Yes, sir.
And you want to put that in fuel because it's higher, and I I have no problem with that. I guess my question is that gonna be enough?
If fuel costs stay at this level, yes, it would negate the negative variance that's projected. But if they continue to go up, and depending on the amount, we will still be over budget in that category and look for cost containment in other areas to meet budget.
But right now, you think that's a hopeful, realistic figure?
It's sufficient if it doesn't skyrocket anymore. If it continues to go up, we will show negative variances, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Tabitha.
Why are you moving it now?
We usually do a budget amendment after the first 3 operating months when we know how much our health insurance costs are going to cost, and we budget before the tax digest is final. So we usually wait till the first quarter's over and propose a budget amendment for actual tax digest and then any other trends that we see in actual numbers.
Can I move?
I was gonna move to approve it.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then let's move to approve it.
I move to approve it.
Second.
Okay, then Beverly, set us up. Okay, all votes are cast and the motion carries. So the final action item is a transportation funding agreement. Can we have a first and a second to begin discussion on this?
Second.
So Curtis?
So the city of Savannah wants to modify the way the funding is collected and distributed for the POR fees, which directly impact the funding of the water ferry. And right now it currently goes through a couple different entities before it actually gets to us. And so they want to just basically change it to where it just goes directly to us. They had to get us on board, Sandy on board, convention group, so really it's a shared agreement between everybody. We worked with Ty, myself, Terry, and Jimmy worked together, making sure that we were able to get control over the fact that we provide services that are only funded. Originally, it was that we would provide X amount of services, which we said we can't do that unless the funding's there, so they modified the contract to protect us. How long have we been working on this, Ty?
Months.
Several months.
And with parties and people that almost a cast of thousands. So you had ideas coming in every direction. There was pushback from the Trade Center and from the Weston about their continuing their funding, their portion of the funding. But this essentially was an idea and a concept that was developed by the city manager and promoted by the city manager. And it will simplify. It will simplify how this funding is handled. And we held very firm that we were not going to provide any service that wasn't going to be paid for, and that if the funding was not there, we could reduce the service, or they could come up with more funding. But we were not going to provide a service that's not paid for.
So we finally got to an agreement, and we need board approval to enter into that agreement with the city of Savannah.
This is the 10th draft.
This is
version 10.
This
will
is
be
the
retroactive.
10th iteration.
And have to be retroactive to January 1st.
Right.
Do we have any discussions on this?
Move to
agreement?
approve.
Second.
Okay, then let's set us up, Beverly, so we can vote. Okay, the motion carries 6 yeses and 2 abstentions and 1 no. It's after the no vote, minus 1.
No.
We got 2 no's.
No.
Okay, no vote. Oh, gotcha. Okay, never mind. I'm dyslexic. Okay, then that brings us to the end of the action items. So the next item is the executive director's report, and then we have the service and delivery updates. This is, we're already at the 2-hour mark. We've got a executive session which is important for legal items. So I would propose, instead of having the reports given by the executive director or the systems update, if anybody has any questions from reading through the information, let's just ask the specific questions. Is that all right with everybody?
I've got one.
Bill?
Looking to find the report, but the numbers on paratransit, and I've brought this up before, and I understand that the explanation has always been that it doesn't cost us anything extra, but it still is a concern to me. Maybe, I'm not sure why we needed all of this candidate report for work off.
20 pages.
Interesting stuff.
It's interesting stuff, but put it out for me.
Find it here. Our paratransit changes, we had a 9% increase in clients, a 19% increase in personal care attendants, and a 30% increase in companions. I mean, at some point, aren't we running out of room on these buses for all the people that are tagging along?
Well,
And if we've only had a 9% increase in total clients, why would we have an almost 20% increase in personal care attendants? Does suddenly the clients we have need additional attendants with them? Or?
Well, those numbers are a little skewed because last year we had Hurricane Irma, so the increases aren't what they would normally be because we didn't run service for a few days last year. So that's one of the reasons why we have more personal care attendants as a whole. Not really sure. It's been increasing as well. Ridership has increased, so personal care attendance increased as well.
Well, and it's not the. I mean, compared to Irma, I mean, I take your point, but my question really is more about the relative changes. I would expect to see something fairly comparable in ridership changes between the clients, the attendants, and the companions. And we've got huge differences here.
I think part of that is as well as we're doing more wheelchairs as well. So we're going to have more personal care attendants to help with folks with wheelchairs. So I think that has a little bit to do with it as well. Because our wheelchair passengers are up as well on paratransit.
But our companions, not attendants, is up more than 3 times what the ridership is. And just I don't understand why we keep, and this has been going on for a while. We keep seeing more and more people riding paratransit that aren't clients.
What is a companion?
That's someone who rides with someone.
Is that not the same as a personal care attendant?
No.
So how many companions do you get to take?
We take one with them.
You take one companion.
So we've had riders that weren't having anybody go with them that now are, because if you can't carry but one with you, then you should have the same increase in companions that you've got in clients.
Or personal care.
It's not a big deal, again, because it's a service we're providing to the client. It's got to go from point A to point B. I get that. I guess when we keep seeing these bigger number changes, it does feel like somebody's taking advantage of the system, for one thing. And the other thing is it does concern me a little bit with these kind of jumps, with 3 times as many companions increased as the riders. At some point, are we going to be filling the vehicles? Are we going to start running into seat issues? Maybe not. Maybe as long as we're picking up one client and taking them from point A to point B, it doesn't matter. But it just the disparity in those numbers just is a kind of a red flag to me, and I don't. Maybe
we can certainly look into that a little closer as we get to full capacity and the service kind of levels out a little bit. We can definitely do that.
Now, do we charge what do we charge? I mean, I know we have some kind of minimal charge for the client.
$2.
What about the attendants? Is there a charge for the attendant as well?
No.
And for the companion?
Yes.
What does the companion pay? Same as the client?
Yes.
And that's good.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
We're generating more revenue.
Well, we're not
Seating.
generating more revenue than if they were riding a fixed route system.
Sure.
We're creating an additional subsidy that the county's having to cover.
Are we close to capacity there? No, not really. So we could definitely keep an eye on
With
it.
our
but-
new vehicles, we have, a lot more room.
And I'm
So
not
the
objecting-
vehicles are bigger.
Yes.
Much bigger.
Our new vehicles are bigger.
So you might not have had room for a companion before.
I don't think that's been an issue in the past. Hasn't come up.
Any other questions?
I'm not objecting to anybody that legitimately needs a ride and needs, whatever companion or attendant they need. I just, just a big difference in these numbers is.
How many people could fit in the old vehicles? The MDVs, whatever those little.
The
Could you have
MD1s?
gotten 3 people in there with a wheelchair?
An MD1?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could, one wheelchair, 2 people, yes.
But
These new
if
ones.
that was shared, that couldn't be shared then. That was if they picked up the husband, the wife, and the aide, then that was full, there was no additional.
And they have to let us know in advance if they're gonna have a PCA and a companion.
They do.
So,
Okay.
When it becomes.
we plan.
And I think
when
the
they make
bigger
the
buses
reservation.
just is promoting it, an easier event for more people to go.
Since we're on paratransit, I had a question going through the checks that we wrote. I saw checks to Ron Murphy and Larry Tenenholtz.
The trainers, the extra trainers that were here for the class.
And they're no longer here, we're not doing any contract service, any trainers, right?
I just saw the contract services in the move. Okay, got it. Any other questions that we wrote down from reading all this? If not, I would like to entertain a motion to go into executive session for legal matters.
Second.
We have a second.
Second.
What?
All those in favor?
Let's go.
Aye.
Aye.
A break.
Opposed?
We're taking a break.
No, the thing keeps us going while we're clearing out the room.
Yes.
Is there any time?
Is it lunchtime?
Will they let us?
You take it,
All right, folks.
See ya.
I'll see you later, man. Luke, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay.
See you next month.
Yeah.
Bye, Mike. Send Patton Squared, great information on the election.
Well, thank you. Well informed about everything.
The governor's call.